Hi, I'm Fiona, one of the MS nurses at Auckland Hospital. As you can see, I'm sitting in a very charming hospital clinic room, so I apologise for my lovely background. My job this evening is to talk you through sleep and sleep and MS. It's certainly something I've been really interested in lately. And after sort of going through the preparation for this webinar, I've learned a lot. So I'm hoping that this will be of use for you. It's something that will live on the website for MS Auckland for the future that you can go back and refer to. I've also just written an article for MS Matters magazine, so you could have a look at that as well. So without further ado, let's get talking about sleep. That should do it. So, I don't know. I mean, we definitely know that sleep is important for all humans, right? Some of us, I think, quite often feel a lot like this, and we certainly know in the context of a neurological condition and MS in this context that, you know, things are hard enough. You're just definitely needing to get a good night's sleep. And I think that kind of begs the question, though, what is actually a healthy night's sleep? And I think we tend to think 8 hours is the gold standard of sleep. But actually, in reality, looking back, when the world didn't have quite so much amazingness about it, didn't have electricity, you know, people back in literally the dark ages didn't used to sleep through for 8 hours. They'd often wake in the middle of the night and have a snack and a chat and hang out with their family and then go back to sleep. So, you know, if you're in Charles Dickens's London, I mean, he was a man who used to wake in the middle of the night and walk around, get his ideas for his books and go back and get a few more hours sleep with a break in the middle. You know, these days we're not so into dividing our sleep and having a midnight snack. Generally, 90-minute cycles are how our sleep happens, and 7 to 17 hours is required of sleep every 24 hours. I've learned that deep sleep is the key, and most of us as adults need 1.5 to 2 hours of this per night, and I'll tell you a bit more about deep sleep later on. But certainly over that deep sleep time, our bodies do a lot of things, as well as relaxing the muscles. We get an increased blood supply to them. The slowing of our heart rate and breathing for repair, tissue growth, release of essential hormones. And without deep sleep, the functions can't take place. So we can start experiencing symptoms of sleep deprivation. So I guess it's important to establish what is healthy before we start talking about what might be a problem. So there are many things often described as sleep hygiene that we should all try and follow. And I guess, you may get to the next slide, work out that you don't actually have any issues with sleep, and then I set you free to go and do something else with your time. But if you are someone who has got some sleep-related issues, probably worth watching on for a bit longer. These are things to consider about your sleep. And I mean, it's all just stuff we actually probably know with common sense, trying to avoid screens in your room, and
sleep right.
Sorry, that's my lovely colleague Ernie who just popped in halfway through my recording. Right, so what were we talking about? We were talking about good habits for sleeping, weren't we? So really important to not have screens in your bedroom. Try not to charge your phone in your room if you can. There's no reason why we can't buy alarm clocks that aren't part of our phones, but it's funny how we feel like phones need to be our alarm clocks. The things to avoid, alcohol, which I'll talk more about later, caffeine after midday, I guess, trying to avoid really heavy meals before you sleep, and hardcore training sessions are perhaps not best done in the evening. And things that are good, though, for our sleep is getting up at the same time, having that sort of routine, light exercise in the evening, absolutely great. Making sure your bed's comfortable, your pillow's comfortable, that your room's not too hot and it's actually got good ventilation. There's a temperature drop that helps us get off to sleep, actually. If you're not warm, your body has to warm up and it helps you get off to sleep. A bedtime routine, and, some people will tell you lavender pillows and all sorts of things like that. But, it's cool to keep it to the basics, I think. Some facts, I guess, that we should sort of definitely acknowledge. A bad night's sleep makes you feel tired, right? And fatigue affects 90% of people with MS at some point. We know, and if you're someone out there who has it, fatigue causes decreases in your quality of life and sometimes socioeconomic consequences, and it's not cool. Fatigue's not good. You've got enough going on with MS already. You need to get a good night's sleep in. And there are crossover factors from our physical and mental health that impact on our sleep. And I'm going to talk about some of those as we go through as well. There's a lot of crossover symptoms between MS and sleep dysfunction. So anything that I have actually put a little asterisk next to, happens to people outside of MS as well, which is almost every single thing. So I will be talking about these as we go through. Bladder dysfunction, depression and anxiety is going to impact on your sleep, insomnia, sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, and these are things that happen to people outside of an MS diagnosis. More often with MS, we're talking about spasticity or neuropathic pain, and also potentially the side effects of prescribed medicines. Steroids are a great example, and if you've ever had steroids, you potentially have had some insomnia and sleep pattern disturbances. So we'll touch on those as we go through. But if you're someone out there who has issues from time to time or currently constantly with your sleep, the best thing to start off with, and it's kind of boring but actually really important, is a sleep diary. We need you to keep a sleep diary for a couple of weeks and think about what your sleep is like each night. So there's loads of them if you Google them up. This one in particular talks about what time you're going to bed, how long you slept for, how many times did you wake up, and then it's quite helpful if you can calculate at the end of the week what your typical night's sleep is and then work out an average. So, I mean, there are a few different sleep problems, I guess, and insomnia is one that so many people in the world experience, some people chronically and some people just from time to time. And 90% of people, insomnia can be completely cured. And so there are different ways of doing this. And I suppose we should acknowledge that there's a great website actually called Sleep Haven, www.sleephaven, and there's evidence to suggest that cognitive behavioural therapy is really helpful to manage insomnia. I've just signed up to try out a CBT online session with a place called justathought.co.nz. They look like they do CBT for lots of different things. So I thought I'd do a bit of a dummy run and see how that went, but you might want to have a look at that yourself. Certainly, if you are having sleep issues, I'm happy to do a referral for you. It's my phone ringing, sorry. Medical management for sleep, sleeping tablets, people often feel quite nervous about, but certainly there are sleep tablets available. The more medicalised ones would be melatonin, which is a more natural-based sleep medicine that your GP can prescribe for you. Cannabis products, some people find really, really helpful to help settle into a good sleep pattern. Again, that's something that you can look at on a private basis and self-refer to one of the many cannabis clinics around New Zealand. Also another medicine called amitriptyline that we often use in neurology that's helpful for nerve-ending discomfort, and it helps people get off to sleep. If you're someone who's finding that they're having nerve-ending pain when the world is quieter, just at bedtime, that's a really good medicine to consider. Also, thinking about the hormonal impact that perimenopause and menopause can have on sleep as well. And that's something that don't, underestimate the power of speaking to your GP if you're someone who is in menopause or perimenopause. Hormonal replacement may actually really help your sleep pattern as well. I am such a huge fan of this guy. I really, really like Michael Mosley. And he's got such good advice as far as it goes for sleep. His book, 4 Weeks to a Better Sleep, definitely worth having a look at. It's actually quite hard to even get. The library has quite a big wait list for it. So it might be worth purchasing. He's got great everyday advice. I like the fact that he was a doctor who translated this all into really good consumable everyday person advice. So his great advice is there's a bunch of different things talking about 4 and 2-4 breathing or box breathing, where you breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 2 counts, and breathe out for 4 counts. And just regulating that breathing can really help people's sleep. His theory is if you can't get to sleep, just get up and do something else until you're tired again and retry, rather than lying there thinking, oh my God, I can't get to sleep, because it's just not helpful. And then his other recommendation, amongst so many things, in fact, you can Google him and have a look. He's got a lot of really cool stuff that is Googleable and downloadable online. So sleep production therapy. Sleep production therapy is kind of intense, but if you've got significant insomnia, it can be really helpful. So the theory is that with your sleep diary, you would look at how much you sleep exactly over the 7 days and get an average out. So let's say that your average sleep is 6 hours over the week. He's saying never restrict your sleep to be less than 5 hours, but you need to only get those 6 hours sleep in. So, this may be for some people not being able to go to sleep till midnight, but then you must set your alarm for the normal time you always do. So you calculate your average back from your waking up time, which means you're forcing yourself to stay awake. But then, and it's hard, he says, but after a few days, your body is actually really tired when you go to sleep. And as the 4 weeks go by, you can increase your sleep hours or time by 20 minutes each night, which should overall really abolish any insomnia. I definitely think having a look at his book, and potentially after you may have tried some of the other methods, that sleep reduction therapy could be quite helpful. I haven't tried it myself. So I guess other things to consider are who sleeps with you, your partner, your dogs, your kids, outside of your partner, dogs. Gosh, our dog, when he sneaks into our room, can make such a racket, always licking his armpits in the middle of the night. So maybe getting, as quiet a sleeping area as possible. No dogs. How old are your pillows and mattress? Is your room well ventilated? We've talked about habits and screens. And then I guess the next one is thinking about alcohol and the impact alcohol might have. It is quite significant, actually, is the bad news out there, everybody. So chronic alcohol use can worsen insomnia, and it has a big impact on our REM and our NREM sleep patterns. So with increased alcohol intake, your NREM sleep time can go up, and you have less REM sleep. And REM sleep's involved in memory consolidation and learning. And then also, and anyone knows after they've had a few glasses of wine too many, that as your alcohol level drops in your blood, you can sleep more fitfully. If it can be hot, your temperature fluctuates, you wake up more, perhaps you need to go to the loo, so your sleep quality is significantly less with alcohol on board. So that's one to think about chopping out. Bladder management, also something to really think about. Are you up to the toilet overnight? When do you have your last caffeinated drink? Are you experiencing urgency and frequency during the night and during the day? And if so, please do talk to us. I've spelled anticholinergic completely incorrectly there, but anticholinergic medicines or amitriptyline may be really helpful for you for your bladder management. And I think worth thinking about, because actually once you manage that, you may find that that your sleep actually improves, right? Because your bladder is behaving better. Restless leg syndrome is something to think about as well. You may or may not have restless leg syndrome. People who don't have MS can certainly have it as well. A pretty unpleasant sensation, more prevalent by 3 times in people with MS. And there is a screening question, which I've listed there. When you're relaxing at night, do you get a restless feeling in your legs that can be relieved by movement? And if the answer is yes, we need to ask more questions. We should check your ferritin levels because that can have an impact on restless legs. And medication options are available. Your neurologist can make a tailored plan depending on the severity and frequency of your symptoms. There is a diagnostic criteria actually for restless leg syndrome, and certainly it's quite broad actually. I feel like more people experience this than we expect, and I do think it's something that you should bring up if you're finding that happens to you. Another significant thing that causes sleep problems and fatigue, and I think we tend to think it can be MS, but sleep apnea, it's quite a big deal actually. So by definition, this is episodes of upper airway obstruction and hypoxia, so not enough oxygen to your brain during sleep. It's under-recognised in general. You've got a higher likelihood of experiencing this if you're someone with MS. And rates of sleep apnea are increased by disability level, and more pronounced in people with progressive MS. So there is a way of looking into this. It's called the Stop-Bang questionnaire. And I think if you have a quick look through this, you'll get a sense of whether or not you might be someone who is more likely or not to experience sleep apnea. So snoring is a big one. Anyone out there with a snoring partner will completely understand that. Tiredness, observed apnea, which I've spelled wrong. So observed apnea is your partner hearing that whole sort of and that stopping of breathing and then the restarting. I won't try and do that noise again. The body mass index is the more weight you're carrying, the more likely you potentially are to have sleep apnea. Your age, so more likely in greater age, neck circumference. So, literally, and some women postmenopausally put more weight on around their neck, so increased neck circumference is a risk as well. And gender, more prominent in the lads out there. So you guys, have a think about it. How we manage sleep apnea is often by a CPAP machine. So that's a continuous oxygen machine that you wear on your face. This needs to be used for at least 5 hours per day. You need to be persistent. Again, terrible spelling on that slide. Persistent. It takes troubleshooting sometimes, getting used to wearing the mask. If the mask is ill-fitting, sometimes there can be hissing noises that come with it that can be sort of disruptive and kind of annoying for you and your partner, as well as the CPAP machine. I'm going to talk to you a wee bit more about that with a case study in a moment. There are lifestyle measures you want to look at as well for sleep apnea. So reducing your weight, stopping smoking, reducing alcohol, and raising the head of the bed actually can help. If people do start on CPAP and they're non-compliant, it can have an impact on their driving capacity and removal of a license. So if you're going to start on CPAP, you need to stick with it and be committed to trying it. I've spoken to one of our patients today whose name is not Sarah, but I'm calling her Sarah for this talk. She has MS, diagnosed back in 2013. She has a BMI of 46.94 and a weight of 114 kgs at age 59. And she had always felt tired and low energy, and had felt this was linked to her MS diagnosis, because why wouldn't you think that? I totally understand that. But it was when her GP actually did the sleepiness scale with her, and she got a 14 out of 24. You'll see the scale actually on the other side here. She was finding that she was very, she said she could sit at her laptop working and very easily fall asleep at any time of the day. And so her GP referred her for a sleep study. Now, that used to be when you'd come into the hospital, you would have to sleep overnight. It all sounded a bit grim, actually. Whereas now you pick up your sleep monitoring machine. It fits on your finger, and then depending if you're a nose breather or a mouth breather, you may be fitted one with a machine that is a nasal prong, and it has a chest monitor as well. And they want you to sleep for at least 6 hours with this on for one night only. So you wear it one night only for this test. And then the results are totted up by the machine monitoring respiratory lab. In her case, she is a mouth breather, and if you're a nose or a mouth breather, it depends on what sort of CPAP machine you're given. In her case, Sarah's machine fits under her nose and over her mouth. She says if you are a single person, you might want to find a partner if you're looking for one before you start wearing your CPAP machine, as it's in her description not very romantic, but they're a lot smaller than they used to be. Her kids call it the elephant trunk because it's got a tube that goes down to the machine. And she says her husband likes her wearing it because he can't hear her very clearly and can ignore her, but she was being very cheeky. So the outcomes have been miraculous. She's been using this now since March, so I don't know, less than 5 months. She said she felt an almost instant, obvious increase in energy, even after 6 hours of sleeping with the CPAP machine on the first night. Couldn't believe it. Her work capacity, as far as her energy and her concentration and her ability. She works as an accountant and has really, the end of quarter intensity where sleep is short and work is long. And her energy levels have been great for that. She said her brain fog lifted, which she thought was MS related as well. And her concentration and focus is so much better. Funnily enough, her restless legs, which is also one of her symptoms, has significantly improved. She has had a couple of nights where she hasn't used it recently because she's been working so late. And she said that she, over these nights, has been more restless and has been kicking her husband in her sleep. And now he's got a ruptured Achilles. So he's been giving her a hard time about getting her CPAP machine back on because he doesn't want her to hurt his recovery. So it's been really transformational for her. So, things to consider. Again, you may not be someone who has any signs of sleep apnea, but all of the impacts of these different sort of sleep issues will have a roll-on effect to your MS. I think it's really important if you notice any of these things. So if you are someone who has bladder urgency and frequency, that you get some help with that. It may be that just looking at that will get you a better night's sleep. If you're someone with mood issues, so low mood, anxiety and depression, you're going to have potentially big sleep issues because of those thoughts that are racing. So again, it's talking to your GP and getting help. If you're someone who's got the mental health underlying symptoms, it will leak through into your sleep, and you need your sleep. Restless legs, please talk to your GP, your MS team. These things will all, again, roll on. So sleep issues aren't a product of MS, but symptoms related to MS and symptoms not related to MS, just real everyday life stuff, can have an impact on how you're sleeping. And there's so much that we can do and you can do out there to help you get a better night's sleep. Really happy to take questions at the end of this. And I now just have to work out how to stop sharing and stop recording this. There's some really wonderful resources out there online, and I do recommend you have a look at them. Maybe try out that CBT website and drop me an email, msnurse@adhv.govt.nz, if you've got any questions. If you're watching this and you live outside of the Auckland area, find out who your MS nurses and MS team are locally. Speak to your community advisors at MS New Zealand or your local branches. There'll be people out there who are only too willing to help you. Okay.